Morning.
Good morning, Kathleen. How are you?
Not too bad. It might get a little raucous here. I've got a new kitten that wants to explore everything.
How old is he? I want to see him.
Uh, just 2 months.
Oh, wow. He's just little. He's
Really tiny. Likes to play on my computer. I'll show you. Just hang on.
what's his name?
Java.
Java or Jama?
Java, as in
Java.
coffee.
Okay.
See?
Siamese.
Yeah.
Oh,
Siamese and something else. What is it now? My husband did all the research, so
so cute.
oh, so busy. Holy.
They are. They really are. And I love how they just climb up you. I've had cats, and I currently don't have any pets now, but I badly miss having a cat. And 2 years ago, actually, 2 years ago next month, my buddy Merlin, 19 years old, died.
Oh,
He was the neighborhood cat. People I didn't even know knew his name as they walked past, and he would walk into other people's homes. He had relationships with all these different people. He was such a character and an incredible hunter and a really good roommate, except for whenever I'd go away, he'd pee on my pajamas to express his displeasure. And I went with it. But he grew up with my kids, and it was just really cute. He was part of the family.
yeah. They tend to be that. We actually have had cats for years, and we just our last pair of cats passed on a couple of years ago. So we were sort of, you know, we got to get
That's
over this.
uh, I'm I don't know. I've got fantastic neighbors. Who would take care of my cat when I'd go away. And even if he was out in a bed, I'd be in a cab or in an Uber on the way to the airport. I just text them saying, Merlin's out. They've got the key. Someone's going to let him in and he'll be fine. And so I've got a great village around here. So
Yeah, perfect.
now I'm just debating, do I want the responsibility?
Well, this one's a little tagger, that's for sure.
And I'm sure, yeah, they're fun. I do miss it actually, and just
Yeah.
seeing you little guy makes me think maybe because it comes up quite a bit. All right, good morning, Peter.
Morning.
Hello, you two.
How are you doing?
I'm well. It's a beautiful, windy, sunny day. Watching the waves roll in. Life's pretty good here.
Let's get right. The tourists gone, are they?
Tourists are gone. I like to say it's the bored and lonely season.
Okay, it's got it. When you told me how much the population swell is,
Oh, it goes from 500 to 20,000 for eight
that's
weeks. 8 weeks a year, it becomes overwhelming.
that's a massive jump. I can't.
Are you expecting that you'll have snowbirds showing up
No,
this winter?
no, it's these outer islands, Cortez, Hornby. Um, they really cater to middle class families for eight
Okay.
weeks, and they have since the 60s. And so, in September, you'll see a few um, snowbirds that are in their $200,000 RVs, and then it
Those
just
are their
drops.
homes.
Yeah, exactly. And then it just drops right off. So it's an interesting study because like it's um, unmanaged tourism, and the BC government bought a private campground. So now we've got a quite a large government group showing up in the summer to police all of this, which has its pros and cons, depending on if you like dogs or not. They seem to be policing the domestic dog more than anything. So yeah, it's interesting. It's an interesting evolution to watch, but I've always wondered if people will get tired of it at some point, because I joke that all the guys that used to grow dope, they all bought real estate with their dope proceeds when they were making real money. And now they can't make money growing dope. They've become Airbnb hosts. And the reason I jokingly say that is because I grew up with a couple of them. So I know exactly who they are that now rent 5 houses and they've never had a job in their lives, but they were really good at growing pot. So it's kind of funny.
It's funny you say that because I know some of those guys too who may have left the military and decided to
Yeah, that's right. May or may not.
Sunshine Coast, and your neighborhood is where they're at. It's funny how regulation can crush a market.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's anyway, it's interesting to watch, but I think I think it's a really good data set, the canary in the coal mine, because if it's happening here, it's going to happen everywhere eventually. So you can really watch trends and how humans behave, you know, what I find is the most obvious is how people follow the path of least resistance. So renting real estate, being a landlord, is the path of least resistance. And people that own homes here are willing to camp in the summer because most of them were hippies anyway. That's their lifestyle, and they rent their main house out, and then they use the proceeds of that extremely high rent for nothing, for very little, and then they go live in Mexico for 4 months in the winter. So it's a real lifestyle. And it's funny because if you talk about the economy, they're just not interested in an alternative. They're like, no, we're okay with just renting our homes. And like it's you could suggest all sorts of other alternatives to tourism, but it's just nobody's interested in working towards that. So it's kind of, yeah, it's fun to watch.
It is, and I like how you bring it back to the human factor, Peter, because that's exactly what I think a lot of people miss out on it. Oh, if we build it, they'll come. And humans are inherently lazy and will follow the path of least resistance.
Hot lava flows as it will. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, that's very much missed.
But you make a really good point too about Airbnb. It's really established an opportunity to further commoditize real estate, particularly residential real estate, which the story that you related, Peter, is probably on many levels, that's not a bad story. It turns out to be less socialized, I guess, when people own all kinds of different rentals, and their whole purpose is simply to capitalize on the need for accommodation. So
Well, and then the bigger, or sorry, not the bigger. Another question is, why did the government get into the campground business when it was already functioning as a
yeah, that's
private
curious.
private enterprise? I mean, is there some? I'm convinced there was some horse trading going on for real estate in Victoria that made that deal happen, but never to be proved, of course. But that would be my first assumption: is the guy that owned the campground is a developer in Victoria and had something that they wanted there, so they put a deal together that got him out of this.
Interesting.
Yeah, I've just been well, I'm sure by now you know that I'm extremely interested in the whole housing situation, but just following different business models, and I may have mentioned this earlier as well. I'm very concerned about private equity. Right now, I'm following it's a mass unionization actually of tenants of commercial or residential rentals, and they are doing that to exert some pressure on the owners of the buildings that they are in to actually do some maintenance on the buildings. So it's of interest to me as well. I mean, being in the whole facility management game, that the value of your real estate is indeed your real estate. And if you're not keeping it maintained, then the value is just dropping right off. And notwithstanding the fact that you're actually taking rental from people that live in those units, and you are squeezing them and doing nothing for them. It's huge. So it's kind of interesting that this has spawned a unionization of tenants, and is mainly in this. There's about 3 or 4 states where this is going on, and I'm watching this with interest because the power of the people.
And it's the same, it's no different than the democratization of access to real estate investment with Airbnb. And
Yeah.
I think with everything that's happening in the world, and there's triggers at there's metrics for the triggers in terms of what happens in society to create or where civil unrest turns, and 130% um, debt to GDP is that magic number, and we're creeping up to it. I think the US is at 127 right now. It was in this range of 2020, and we've been hovering between 120 and 130 for that ceiling. And other countries have hit this point where people start turning. That's one piece I just wanted to share because that's really interesting. And then I think there's some other magic happening behind the scenes with digital currencies and making debt disappear. We'll see what happens there. Um, the other piece is when you see private, and I watch this, I just look at the follow the money in terms of what's happening in the world and the trends, and look at the black stones and the black rocks and what they're picking up, and then in areas with what you just said, Kathleen, of lack of O&M or operations and maintenance investment, or preventive maintenance in the assets. There's no practical reason you don't, or you do that, or neglect to do those activities, unless you're just waiting to demolish and build bigger, which is what I suspect is happening.
In some cases, yes. In other cases, yeah. Well, it does it functions on different levels. You've heard of renovictions.
Yes.
Yeah, and whether or not there's any renovation done, it's a really good lever to boot people out so you can up the rent and just charge more. So that
But
too is a
and
concern.
and to argue the other side, because I'm a landlord, is the legislation isn't in the favor of the landlord. So if you are a responsible landlord and you've got tenants that you're increasing the CPI increase you're allowed to do every year, which is between 1.5 and 2.5% on a good year, but your expenses, the cost of utilities, property
Yeah.
taxes, has gone is climbs higher than 2.5. So being able to, at some point, it's not cost effective to be a landlord, and we're not incentivized to increase housing supply or rental supply. So it's a really tricky balance. And even I'm in a situation where I'm looking at, what do I do? This isn't making sense in a property I own, and it's costing me. It's an older building. There's been major renovations I've had to do that are surprises from burst pipes, and insurance didn't cover it. What do I do? I need to increase my cash flow in that building. How do I do that?
Yeah, no, that's a really, really good point. And actually, I'm glad you brought it up because there are two sides to this story. I too was a landlord at some point with an old brick duplex and upper lower, and it was built in the early, well, I don't know, like 1920 or something like that. Like it was really quite old. So of course it had lead pipes, lead water pipes. which then the city decided that lead wasn't good in water, but they weren't going to deal with any feed that went to private property. They would deal with the major. So changing that out was just, whoa.
And I've had to do that in every one of my buildings because for the same reason I bought in transitioning neighborhood where it's gentrifying and where I see the upside to be the greatest. And every one of those buildings have had the water mains, which isn't covered by insurance, fail, or I've had to replace it.
Yeah,
And it comes with the price tag of $8,000 to $10,000
yeah.
for a duplex or triplex.
Yeah. Now, being in the bigger game of facility management, it's something that's really neglected with residential in far too much. It really is. So, I mean, there are efforts that should be undertaken annually for all kinds of different things. But, when you buy an aged building, you really don't have, and because there isn't good documentation, so you really don't know, okay, what's the state of affairs here? And what's the life cycle left?
That's it. And the standard or the metric I've followed, a benchmark for managing different assets and for buildings, uh, non-specialized buildings, was 2% capital per year and not including labor, 2% O&M per year. That was that reinvestment value. And really, if you just, it's a ratio of its life expectancy at 50 years, 2% makes sense. But as long as you're recapitalizing and budget that, you're good. And that works for homes as well. And forecasting that for windows, roofs, driveways, HVAC units, any other capital elements of the home, 2% budgeted.
Yeah,
You don't have to worry about it. You'll have enough based on how those things reach the end of their life cycle. And
yeah,
I just don't. Everything has a metric, which yeah, is a great segue into what I wanted to discuss later.
perfect.
Okay, now be the time. It also explains why I'm wearing what I'm wearing, and I'm working off of about 2 hours sleep and about 4 hours from the night before because I've been stress testing from Friday until Monday night my integrated stewardship model, putting in different examples to see the outputs it would give, and it's just blown me away. It's fucking blown me away in terms of everything from accountability structure up to cabinet, spelling it out, the steps. And I want to take an example and throw it in here, and we can just see what it does right now. But what I did, and my deadline was this. This was just a really fun and exciting exercise, but it's been a huge lift and labor of love. It's exceptionally comprehensive for what I've done, and the flow of decision making and then the output to essentially have good governance, localized benefits to communities, and uh, um, of course, my brain, I'm not firing on all cylinders, but what I realized is I needed to, as I was building out the post-secondary institution initiative and other things I was doing it all comes down to the same fundamentals, the values, the RACI elements. This is the basis for everything of how I do what I do and what I think is needed in the world for responsible governance and decision making and creating accountability and just getting stuff done instead of what our governments do. And the applications is this is as I share it with others, the uptick is really exciting in terms of clients that want me to position this because this is what I how I serve them and de-risking them and to show their lending partners or investors that hey, this is what is being applied. So now this I'll be starting to see this integrated stewardship, which I've trademarked or I'm trademarking, branded and as a vote of confidence in 3 funds in the U.S. using it because it creates accountability between the lending partner and the recipients. and creates results and a feedback mechanism to show that things are on track with a real-time response or course correction for anything that's outside of the defined healthy ranges for all the KPIs. So with that, I then finalize that. So if it was at an 80 to 85% level of, I guess, completion or perfection, I'd say it's about 95% now. And that shaped the post-secondary institution chief entrepreneur officer. I had a deadline today to get it to Peter by noon. I think I said it to you at 11:59. And I still have the annexes to go, but I really want to get your opinion in critical review before I send this off to Lorna Jean Edmonds, that the member of parliament that was interested in seeing this and sharing this with some of her senior academic counterparts or relationships in some Ontario universities. And with that, I've proposed 3 different pilots because I think there's certain things that are large, which integrated stewardship spits out, as well as there's not one answer. And and it proposes pilots to get more data to be able to then move forward. So I'm and playing with it, pressure testing it. It's yielded some good results. And let's hope that I haven't screwed it up in the last 12 hours in some way, which I don't think. Fingers crossed. So let's throw in a problem statement. What would you guys like to explore? It could be as creative as you want, as large, as small. And I'm going to try it in 2 different ways. So, Kathleen, what comes to mind for you?
I think the biggest challenge that I'm seeing, and in a very large industry, which is the built environment, is different ways to encourage folks to work together instead of compete. So, I mean, a good deal of getting into lean project delivery is all about collaboration, working together, and actually, as we were flipping comments back and forth on LinkedIn, it really is about shared risk and reward.
It is,
Shared
which is
reward.
exactly what this model is all about. So that's a given. What's
Yeah,
the outcome you want based on the problem that exists?
yeah. Well, there's a drive, collective incentive drive to just become more efficient by far. And it has to do with um, how problems are actually viewed and addressed. Like it drives me nuts and has for a long time when it's viewed as a linear process. So someone does something, throws it over their
Right.
shoulder to the next someone who does something. No one ever sees the whole picture. So what we do, and actually that's what I'm kind of intrigued with what uh, Carney's team seems to be up to, is actually think of the round table. I mean, he even sat down with all the premiers, not in a big boardroom table. It was a round table. And I think that was visually important because it's no, we're all in this together, and I'm not sitting at the head of the table. We're all in this together. We all have the same viewpoints because it's circular. And we need to be sharing problems, information, ideas all together if we are going to collectively solve this for everyone's benefit. So again, that's why I really am interested, and because the built environment covers just the whole of the country. So,
Yeah,
and I don't care whether it's projects for mining or, big power, whatever, it doesn't matter. Because if you don't have everyone at the table at the same time, and I'm thinking very strongly of Indigenous folks or environmentally motivated folks. You know what I've discovered actually in my experience is that environmental folks know zero about construction.
Yeah.
And
And this
and
is that because of that, I inserted myself on a national working group or steering committee to look at the procurement of green concrete, and you had all these PhDs and scientists making up policy that had no practicality in terms of how it gets deployed, and the thinking behind it was damaging because I've seen a lot of that happen. But yes, back to you.
no, that is so important because these ideas do need to come together. And it's not that what I've discovered anyway, it's not polarized. But when you work in a linear process and you get these environmentalists coming back, towards the end, trying to, whatever it is, insert their opinion or curtail activity, it struck me they know zippity doodah about construction. So if they had something to offer, it needs to happen as the project details are being defined and worked through. And that's where it should come in because being environmentally conscious is important. And it's not something that, folks involved in construction want to ignore. But they don't like, nor should they, like intervention at, 8/10 of the job. No, that's too late. And you have nothing to offer because you obviously don't know how construction works. Anyway, I have some big stories about that.
I think as do I. And I'm just thinking of even just different comparisons of yes, buy the organic lettuce, don't buy the organic bananas. And this is environmentalists or those teams of people just don't have the practical lens or the budgets. I don't think they've ever been in an environment where you actually have limited means and have a set amount of objectives to achieve or square footage to build or deliver in that manner.
Well, I just to be fair and balanced, because it does happen in both directions, but I'm also not impressed with engineers that do geotechnical engineering from their desk rather than get out to the site. So I inherited a project where that had happened, and in essence, there was no geotechnical. So the entire project had to be shifted because of what was in the ground at huge, huge cost. It was like 100 times the cost of taking a flight out to site and being a geotechnical engineer and just poking around.
And yeah, I've lived that too. It's
So in context to the integrated stewardship, is this a leadership question?
it's any we could talk about what we spoke about in Kathleen's situation in terms of municipalities in BC, and that's what I was digging at my notes about what we spoke about last time. I completely forgot to connect you with that doctor, which I shall do. So municipalities, we can talk about waste management. We can talk about doctor supply. There's no scope too small, too big, or out of anything. I like
Right, but you want a practical problem to run through the
yeah, something that comes up
machine.
correct.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'll think of something too. Let's see.
Yeah, prompt me a bit. Give me some examples.
Yeah. So an example that I ran through with my dad was harmonizing the building code, and the result was perfect. So he's running with that, and he was blown away. Another one was looking at options for Canada's housing crisis, and went down to give me three different pilots, and then I kept pressing, and I think that's where I spotted gaps to refine it. So we could run that again. We could look at how to improve collaboration between different levels of government in the country. We can look at how to fix what are you guys are both in BC.
How come? How
The
about
other way.
something like wealth inequality? Is that too
Yeah,
broad?
I don't know. Let's try it out.
That's a global issue. But
It
hey,
is.
Yeah.
so is housing.
Let's keep it in Canada, and yeah, let's keep it to Canada, and
Well,
let's
you could even do a province like Ontario or BC.
okay, pick one. Which one?
BC because the housing's so expensive.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just going to ask, how would you deal with income inequality in BC?
Or wealth inequality, wealth and income.
Okay, wealth and income.
So is this you've trained an AI model? Is that what it is? Yeah.
I have, and then now I'm interested in how to one protect the IP, but also be able to share it with say
Yeah.
internal externally. So I'll be creating two GPTs.
Yeah, you
And
want to, yeah, but you're still trying to break it.
yes, but I think I'm now I'm pushing it to others like you, Peter, to see if you can break it or at least poke holes in the outputs, which are now
Yeah,
that will
yeah,
second. We'll
yeah.
see. Okay, keep it broad. Um, so let's see what it says. What I've just really liked is how succinct it is because it's really about keeping it simple. Who to engage, how to do it, the flow of accountability,
Yeah.
and then the the softer aspects of how to consult and engage the different stakeholders and so on. So I'm going to try two different windows here to see what output I get in different ways.
Have you considered or can you weave into this model the impact of monopolies?
Yes, it can everything. Um, it's there hasn't been a single thing. There's nothing it can't do in the recommendations it makes and um and these are the questions I want, Kathleen. Like let's throw everything at it. I need to identify where it won't work.
Okay. Um, just as a sidebar, but I think it's foundational to what you're exploring too. I subscribe to this author on Substack. He's actually a tech leader. So been involved in tech for, I don't know, a couple of decades. But his Substack is on leadership. And so I found that very interesting. So he's prolific right now. He's writing a few articles a week. But so I comment and then he comments. And so we're having this kind of discussion. And there's so much around his concern about monopolies, and which is also a concern I have on technology and the hype of AI. So you might find this of interest as well. And so I'll send you some of his articles if you like, and
Sure.
including in that just the comments kind of back and forth because I think that sort of stimulates some more ideas for his writing. But it's huge. I mean, if you're watching what's going on in the US, and I'm sure you are, and the interest that the so-called techie bros have in governance, which is really monopolization. And but I think that that is a concern, and could be a runaway concern. I've been really researching data centers, and I'm lining up some folks for another discussion. And There are over 543 data centers in varying stages of construction right now in a couple of states. Um, they're huge. The amount of power that they are uh, using and water is creating a monster concern with locals, residents, and so on. So there's been pushback and so on. All to say that if we don't see the world as a community,
Hmm.
we see it as a it's all about me, then we have things going on that are ultimately very destructive. And that's what's being experienced actually, just in, small amounts right now, but it will accelerate. But
Gonna accelerate. Yeah, I agree.
yeah,
At a very big, at fast rate, and we're not thinking past our nose, and we're highly competitive, and not
yeah.
even in the development of AI. I think it's highly irresponsible as the rate we're going, and we're not thinking about the energy needs. And by the time we bring on nuclear reactors to be able to supply the power, it's we're already too late. And the
Well,
EV, the rush to increase EVs is not helping that.
so this was one of the points that we were discussing, and given the experience both of you have had as well, the pace is different. Like right now, the pace of technology is just like zooming. But that's not the same pace that policy undertakes. In fact, policy takes generations, and I'm not certain that one needs to mirror the other, but I think there's a middle ground. And somehow I think we need to accelerate policy discussions and decisions while at the same time uh, tempering down, move fast and break things, because it's harder to fix things once they're broken, you know.
Yes, yes, and that was part of the impetus and drive for me to create this, which was that
Yeah, that's a great idea.
and even this, and I'll send you, I'll email both of you with the output it gave, and I would love your feedback. And it's even it ends with I can draft a two-page decision memo for cabinet. I didn't even mention that, but it breaks down the strategic. Yeah, I'll send it to you with boring you, but let me. I want to throw in the monopoly question or the power center, data power center, or the the tech outpacing policy issue. Which one would you like to hear or see?
Well, actually, I think that the connection is monopoly, and I think certainly with the larger players, they are the ones that are like Meta, and well, actually, most of them are funding these huge data centers. Interesting. But before that, I think that there needs to be, and this was part of a discussion I was having with this dude as well. There needs to be some kind of policy that governs um, who owns information. So I think it's Denmark has taken the first step,
Yeah, yeah. Your
and
identity.
yeah, so but it needs to differentiate between what is like, just for instance, someone face, what they look like. That's not something that they developed, as opposed to, I don't know, a painting, right?
Hmm.
So Denmark is doing policy on who owns something that you make, as opposed to you should own your own biometrics, right? So, but so I'm pleased to see that there is some traction happening. but they do happen at different paces. And maybe, historically that's been the case, that something really drastic has to happen to finally trigger a faster pace with policy. But maybe we can learn from that and avoid, that kind of disastrous event to allow us to actually develop protective policy that serves both purposes, right? That's a big one. Sorry.
No, that is a big one, and I may have to go back to the recording to pull that out. But this is all put in. Yeah, I'll share with you guys after I run through a few things and some thoughts from this conversation, and just think about that, those policies.
Well, I was thinking about, and again, this was a discussion I was having with this author, this techie guy, but AI can certainly provide, because they've absorbed it, picked it up from wherever, they can provide input on, I don't know, legal issues, medical issues, and so on. But the doctors and the lawyers who actually practice, they have an association, they have standards of practice, and there's legal ramifications for how they deliver on their service or not. Um, that doesn't yet seem to have passed through to AI, that someone could go online, ask AI about whatever legal thing, and AI will spit something out. But is there any confidence in standards? Is there any confidence in responsibility, legal responsibility, and so on? So that seems to be the hazy gray area right now. And at any rate, again, it's moving fast and it could be breaking things, and we won't know until we fall into the pit.
And yeah, that's what I see happening. And you're absolutely right that policy can't keep up with policy, and legislation isn't going to keep up, and we're going to be in this messy mix as we see other things happening as well, with wealth divergence, increase in national debt, and I don't know if I finished my thought earlier, but beyond that 130% debt to GDP ratio is the interruption of civil war and violence. So when we turn past that point, or other countries cross that threshold, bad things happen, which
I'm
creates
really, I'm a fan of Stephen Keen. He's an economist, and he does not subscribe to the current Friedman economics that we seem to be
Hmm.
involved with. And but how can, because it's a global situation, how can the globe actually get this fixed? Because on the path the current economic system is, yes, there's pitfalls, big ones. And whether or not uh, we need to be taking that path, is part of the big question. I mean, we absolutely need policy around so much, but we won't know what policy to institute unless we understand the impacts. So, Dan, I'd
Script.
like to have a conversation with our elected officials on that.
I I I don't think they have much depth on these issues, though.
That's where my mind went right when you said that, Kathleen. I'm like, why?
Well, it's
Yeah,
curious to me because given Carney's background and knowledge on economics, I don't know. I guess, perhaps
you're giving him way too much credit. Just
perhaps it's like
always
religion.
drop back to high school and ask yourself, who is Mark Carney in high school, and then find that character in your own sphere of and right away you're like, oh right, he's that guy, and suddenly all of that washes away. I mean, he's gamed the system to his advantage probably since he was a kid. That he's not benevolent, he's not intelligent. He's just smart and has a photographic memory and knew how to play the game at a young age. And I'm sure anybody that knew him in high school thought he was dangerous. The
I
entire
agree. I
it's the
agree.
entire it's just, I find it amazing how many people are like, well, he's an economist, he's smart, blah blah blah, and it's like, no, think about who that kid was in high school. Like, that will tell you what's really.
Well, that using that thought frame for a lot of our politicians would be instructive.
Well, that's what I mean. That's the point. Like, going, and I think that's what Tanisha's starting to realize and talk about, is that you know we need to build that alternative system that just negates this kind of ideology and and Canadian status quo, because it's just not working, and it's not going to work. It's always going. We're not going into politics, right? So yeah. So how do you build benevolence into the culture? And this is, I've been thinking a lot about this lately, this idea of taxing the wealthy. And there's a guy, it's quite vocal on social media about this. And I keep thinking, like, my experience with wealthy people, which is, big enough to have an opinion, is that they just go offshore. So, taxing is not the solution. The solution is making it culturally normal for Gen 2 inheritance to give away their wealth. I mean, that's the problem. Is the reason why wealthy people aren't more benevolent. It's social suicide. They think you're acting like a madman if you give away too much money. And so and of course they've got consultants and lawyers and accountants, leading them down the garden path all day long. And I've seen it. I mean, it's remarkable. And so, yeah, how do we make it the social conscience that all these kids that are inheriting money, after $100 million, they give the rest you know away. And like, there's got to be another model, because I think it's naive to say, well, tax the wealthy. That's very, very naive. All you're going to do is hurt the middle class.
And that's that these all these problems that we're discussing that got me or have brought me down this line to create integrated stewardship. And it actually started with something called cause-based sustainable giving, which was aligning a philanthropic aspect of a business with the local economy and tying that into the culture, as well as their marketing, communication, internal communication, and their tax planning strategy to leverage those donations. But it yields better communities, and that's a starting point. So
But I think you're onto something, because foundationally this must grow and be anchored to community.
it has
Yeah.
to. That's it, and
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's
local self-determination.
Yes. Yeah. And
Well,
in
and
fact,
and
that's
it's
the
easy,
scale.
a central planner, and you said it earlier, that geo engineers are doing their work from the office. That's what's going on in Canadian government. Is you've got a machine that is out of touch, right? Like, they're working in their offices doing engineering, and in this case social engineering, but it's out of touch. I mean, look at any of the press releases in the last decade, and you're just like, well, that doesn't make sense at the community level.
Yeah.
So I think these are really, really hard things to disrupt, just because of the way the power and legal structure is today. But things like local self-determination as a North Star, um, culturally getting people to actually barn raise in their communities, convincing politicians that being principled and ethical regardless of religion and family backgrounds is how you stay in power, not, gaslighting and browbeating. Like there's some pretty fundamental things that have gone off track, right? And
Yeah.
I find what's fascinating is such a small group of people can control the narrative, even though 29 million people are actually very moral and very ethical, regardless of religious background. Like most people are good. You have to start with that,
Yeah.
in
It's
mind, right? We're not actually trying to hurt people. And I keep thinking about that when people badmouth bureaucrats and politicians. It's like, or are they just fallible that they're not actually like, I don't think Mark Carney's a bad person. I think he's just been allowed to behave a certain way his entire life, which is what forms his personality. But I don't think he's malicious.
They're just like
well,
young kids. There aren't any bad kids, just bad parents.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah,
so what I think that one of the accelerators of bad behavior or seeming bad behavior or clashing and so on is social media. Because you're right, Peter. I totally agree that for the most part, people are not nasty, you know, when you interact with them day to day, but Jesus, stay off the social media or anti-social media platform
yeah,
because that just seems to, well, a good deal of the, I don't know, messages up there or bots. But there is so much attention that's garnered from that. So we have a deficit of attention.
yeah, yeah. Well, for sure. Yeah, exactly.
And
But
somehow,
it's interesting though that that you can see the gap, that like I often also remind myself that people have to feed their families. So like I see people having really bad behavior in the public service, and I know them in my community. And then I have to remind myself, it's like, the alternative for them is very bleak. And so, they're going to stay within that model because they have three kids to feed, and they know that's wrong. They'll admit it's wrong in private, but they're not going to fall on that sword. And it's interesting because there's a guy out here that runs Innovate Island, and he got his funding cut off, so he had zero funding from the government, and he's kind of changed his platform and his tune now, and I think it's interesting that he wasn't willing to negotiate a better outcome when he was in the position, but now that he's been his funding, well, all of their funding for the whole province has been cut off, that they suddenly get vocal and political. And it's like, okay, that's an important data point to remember that a lot of
what it
people,
does.
a lot of people in public sector operate, immorally because they have kids to feed until they're fired or funding removed. And then suddenly they get very vocal, which is kind of like people quitting smoking, right?
Oh, that's a good one.
Humans are awesome.
You know what, though? I personally, I mean, there's so much to drag on for sure,
Yeah.
but I think that's kind of like the darkness of social media because it's so attention getting. But
Well, and
I
I'd say even further than that. I mean, did you watch Trump's UN speech?
oh I cannot
I mean,
spend time.
it's a masterclass because like he went after global issues and basically put doubt in people's minds in a matter of an hour. And it's like, wow, this is really interesting that he's got this capacity to be so matter of fact without blinking an eye. And now he's got everybody in the free world that has access to the internet watching him speak, questioning greenhouse gas emissions, questioning the United Nations, questioning you know uh, the economy, questioning immigration. Like it's like, and it's so interesting because it's not critical thought, right? It's just this. It's like the guy can, he can, what is the slap shot? Like he can hit a slap shot like nobody's business. And then when you compare him to other politicians, he's in a league of his own, whether you like him or not. I mean, it is a masterclass in spreading misinformation, basically.
Well,
Whether you believe it or not, or whatever camp you're in, it's irrelevant at this point. It's just wild to watch how powerful that is. And then when you compare them, so like I always come back to the Peter principle. So I agree. I think Mark Carney's probably a very intelligent person, but he fits the Peter principle, and he's kind of let loose, which is going to he's going to cause havoc because he doesn't have strong adult supervision. So when you think about the leaders, we need strong, mature adults that are capable of reining these slap shots in, right? And it's even like this two state. I mean, that's horse trading, right? I mean, there's a conversation the public isn't aware of that, brought what French, Canadian, France, a couple of these countries, I mean, are they just saying, because it's not relevant, like it'll never, there's no impact in that statement. You read into it and research it a bit, that it was just posturing, but are they doing that because that was the only thing they could grab onto to kind of say to the US, that you aren't the ultimate, power, right? We're not going to let you be the king of the world.
this is really interesting because there is historic precedence, and
Yeah.
it's deadly.
It is. It is.
So I mean that's the worry that I certainly have, and but I mean there's also historic precedence in sane people being in charge of things. But right now, I mean, getting back to economics, the world is run by greed. And getting back to technology, the oligarchy nature of all of this is also quite apparent. So, but that's
Which goes
ultimately,
and that goes back to what I'm trying to kind of think about and write about is knowing that, back to the human element, we have to create a culture where being generous is more valuable than being selfish.
yeah,
Being benevolent is more value than controlling wealth. Like we have to make power and wealth uncool, and
yeah.
the cool kids are actually the ones throwing the picnic, and
Oh, great
you
strategy.
know, more
Yes.
Sarah McLaughlin, less Kid Rock.
Hey, she just released a new album. Woohoo!
Yeah, yeah. But like there's a light and a darkness, and people know how to
Yeah.
make money with both, right?
So I'm
That's
going to do a bit more exploration. Sorry, this came to my mind now, so I'm going to quickly get it off. But and I heard this on CBC. Anyway, there is a not-for-profit, of course, food bank, and so they were talking to the CEO of this food bank. So there's tons of food produced in Canada, and so much of it is actually just going to waste, even though we do have, monopolized
Isn't
market.
it like 40%? Like the number's really high.
It's
it is.
huge.
Yeah, I remember it's being over 30 was the metric in my
Yeah.
head.
And that's insane. So this guy and his food bank is working with another food bank in either Alberta or Saskatchewan. Anyway, they are trucking food across the prairies because the surplus in the production is different in these provinces and making it available. And there's also here in BC, I don't know if it's the Okanagan or if it's Abbotsford. I think it's Abbotsford. But so this food producer is also recognizing this and making uh, trying to associate with other producers and creating a market that is available for citizens to buy food at. Food is fundamental and it's ridiculous. I mean, I live in the Okanagan here and I like to support local markets, but even these local markets, they are focused on tourists, I think, because their prices
Yeah,
are insane and
yeah,
it doesn't
exactly.
make sense. So there, but I think there's potential
Back to your comment on greed, right? Everyone's
yeah,
figured out it's easier just to go after the tourists because they can get a
yeah.
delta in the price.
So I just wanted to bring your attention to this example of community coming together, starting with a couple of visionaries, if you will, but obviously informed. And I think that, I think it's a model that can be replicated in so many different areas, like housing basics, food basics, right? So, I mean, there's different models because it's been around as long as food, I guess. But for collective citizen ownership of things like
Yeah,
co-ops and so on and so on. And I think that it's time to really start promoting that because
yeah,
it invites a collective citizenry interaction.
And this is that premise of what I build in. Everyone needs to be incentivized. And when I left the
yeah,
government and took the time to think about what the F is wrong with this world where we've landed here and what is the lowest hanging fruit to improve
Right.
human wellness as a collective. And it was connection, collaboration, community. I like alliteration, which
Beautiful.
led me to creating my community 2.0 model, which looks at this in different forms of ownership and ecological considerations, and then the integrated stewardships based on that to be able to connect to see the results you're creating in your own backyard, to get that connection and celebration of the contribution companies make in their backyard, and to build a village because it comes down to that. And we would alleviate, there's just so many benefits that come from it. Decrease
Yeah.
mental health challenges, to therefore lead to physical health improvements, more engagement. We don't have houses of worship that people participate in. We don't have multi-generational homes. So how do you encourage that becomes a catalyst to drive the economy? And so thinking through these different things and poking holes here and there, it's evolved into this. And then establishing, it has to be establishing, I'm finished with that, establishing the metrics for different things because it has to be incentivized. And then looking at the money, how does the money flow? So if the money's coming, either the government's spending it or it's private sector or it's from lending partners, capital sources to invest in businesses, how do you make it so both parties are incentivized so it creates win-win situations in a sustainable way where the right things are being measured? It's not just profit and output, it's actually all the things,
Outcomes.
outcomes. And how do you measure these different things? So this is where I think the world's heading. And then in my disaster forecasting of the world and thinking, okay, well, what does this mean in terms of me just protecting my kids? And Peter and I've talked about this and why I have print copies of foraging in this area of the world, emergency management handbooks and the SAS handbook, is because when I realized, shit, there won't be electricity and internet. I need to order these. But the forecasting in the other side is what if everything goes to shit? What has to happen? Well, I know I've got my community and where we run off to because this is what Army guys or ex-Army guys think about probably for a third of their lives. But it's about coming together. And as that wealth divergence increases, there's going to be the people on UBI, there's going to be the oligarchs, and who's left in the middle? You're
yeah.
what's that? We're going to shift to a feudal society. And so that's the way I see it. So no matter what happens in this world, we will never lose when we look at how to improve the the immediate space we live in and those around us. So that's my motivation, the inspiration, the evidence that I collected in terms of how do you, with the least amount of resources, improve society. And it came to connection. So addiction
Yeah.
decreases, suicide decreases, all these benefits just by healthy human connection.
So,
There's an interesting thought when you say that I don't know where I saw it, but it was basically we've outsourced community and now we have to pay for it. And it's funny because I think about
It's a
places
good
like
quote.
Walmart and Costco in Canada, that like Costco is a buying group. When you talk about a buying group, that is what it is, but we've outsourced it. And and we love $1.50 hot dog. Like they've they've maximized on the human experience based on, probably a lot of high paid um, psychological studies to figure out how to get people to to shop more at Costco. And with the with the fruit and vegetables, I have a friend that's up in the Seychelles region, like and he's always talking about these buying group ideas in rural BC, because by the time it gets to the grocery shelf in those towns, it's 4 times the price of anywhere else, because it's a supply and demand. I mean, we have computers, we have AI, we have lots of things that can create dynamic pricing all day long. We don't need to think about it. It's in the model. And he's kind of trying to constantly figure out, like, how can you buy fruit and veg from eastern British Columbia and have it shipped to the to the coast to divvy up. But and good for him for thinking about it, but the business model is very hard to implement when you think about Costco as your as your competitor, or Walmart as your competitor. So then you kind of go back to this policy idea, and I've been kind of rattling around this idea in my head, from a capitalist standpoint, not from a social standpoint. But what would it look like if we disallowed foreign ownership, because it's not competitive. Like, the wonderful lobbying effort was very successful, saying that competition works. Well, it only works in large populations. It doesn't work in small populations. And so, there's nobody lobbying for local living economies. So of course,
Oh,
of
that's
of
right.
course, they're going to convince you that you're going to get better pricing, but there's so many factors that aren't included in that. And one of the ones, when I worked in the U.S., I couldn't figure out why there was big box drugstores on every corner of the street, like we have gas stations. And my friend said, well, they're there's so much money behind them, they're just waiting out the competition. So they park on each corner of the intersection, and they just keep lowering their prices until the other three leave, and then their prices go up. So to say competition lowers prices is a fallacy,
Oh,
right? And we see that with telecom in Canada. Like, it is
Yeah.
done, like, we should. And again, I'm not advocating, for more government. I mean, I'm advocating the opposite, but I know that federalizing our telecoms is the best thing we could do right now, because Elon's just announced, 10,000 new cell phone satellites. It's going to, negate the cellular. 5G is irrelevant. We've now gone. He's gonna own the satellite, and Rogers is willing to partner with them because they know they're out of business if they don't. And so it's like, again, leakage, sovereignty. Like, don't talk to me about sovereignty if you're not willing to talk about issues like allowing SpaceX to implement Starlink through Rogers
Oh,
into
no
Canada,
kidding.
right?
Well, we used to have, well, Telesat is still around, but
No,
think about,
that's what I mean. I mean, yeah, like, we just, like, there are things that are better off to be moved out of our, our economy, right? I think we have to start having a serious conversation about,
we
like,
do.
what if we told Costco and Walmart they weren't allowed to operate in Canada anymore, but at the same time we created our own versions using the same staff, like convincing
Yeah.
those Canadian executives to, that we'll use our pension funds to fund our own version of a big box. Like, I don't know. To me, I think there's some really strange. behaviors. And the other one, actually, for your integrated stewardship, the other one is about job creation. Like at some point, somebody's going to have to convince me why the priority for elected officials is creating jobs through inviting multinationals into the country. And I understand they're higher paying jobs, they're better corporate hygiene, like they do get better training by working for them. But I'm not convinced that makes any sense to to invite these multinationals in for the sole purpose of upping job numbers. Like we've got to feel a bit of pain to
It is short-term thinking because there are and have been, though over the
yeah.
history of this country, there has been all kinds of Canadian innovation that's been purchased or sold, or in the number of foreign companies in Canada is startling. It's really startling.
Just go to any suburb. I mean, that's what I tell people. Blindfold yourself on High Street, drive out to the suburbs and tell me where you are, and you won't be able to because they all look the same now. It's like Starbucks,
Yeah.
Popeyes, Costco, Walmart. Like, I mean, and communities think they've won because they've attracted these American multinationals to their community because they create, economic, jobs. And I mean, I can't even read those things. I'm just like, oh my God. So yeah, it's fascinating how we've kind of, I would argue we've never actually been sovereign. We've always been a puppet state, whether it's the UK or the US, and now they're going to fight. Well, they're not going to fight because Trump's already, we lost Canada at that state dinner in the UK a couple of weeks ago. I mark my words. That will be history will tell us that's when we lost the country.
Sorry, which dinner was that, Peter?
When Trump was with the royal family of Britain. I
Ooh.
mean, this is just good business. I mean, they said, we're going to bring all this data investment into your country, and you're going to not bring 30,000 troops to Canada like you did last time we tried to take over. You watch, like he's not. There is going to be no war. It's just it's gonna happen either economically or it's going to happen socially. But he knows that's why he doesn't. That's why he's not concerned with Canada anymore, because he knows he's already got it.
Yeah, it's both data and economics. You're quite
But he
right.
had to. But he had to get. He had to win over the UK because
Well,
the social contract, covert or otherwise, was that they were going to come to our rescue, and he realized that he needed to do that, make that chess move, and now he's done the horse trade, like where nobody's coming to save Canada, and he'll just keep chipping away at it economically. And you watch, there'll be more and more foreign investment into Canada in the next 5 years, and everyone will be like, "This is awesome, right? We're doing great." And it's like, "Oh my God, no!"
so
So
I,
yeah,
I was I was going to throw another idea out there because it's a concern in many places, more so right now in the US, but the value of universities and colleges. And with the attack that Trump has taken to post-secondary education in the US, and there's a
yeah,
huge opportunity to accommodate that level of knowledge and expertise in Canada. So there's also uh, an issue in Canada because it was, post-secondary isn't properly funded. It's a provincial authority. And so they were, in fact, bringing in all of these foreign students because they were charging insane tuition fees. And that was a huge funding channel for them. And
yeah,
now with
which they won't
immigration,
admit to.
sorry?